everybody, welcome to another edition of This Week in Cleantech, your favorite 15-minute-ish roundup of the biggest stories in climate and clean energy each week. Today is Friday, July 24, 2026. We've got a returning guest on the horn. We had our producer Claire look up when this was. Way back in 2024. The before times, Mike Casey. That's back when Alexa St. John was last on this show. She joins us from my old stomping grounds in the Mitten via the Associated Press, talking about a story that we want you to read. She'll be on the show in just a few minutes. Right now, you're stuck with the two of us knuckleheads. I'm Factor This content director Paul Gerke, joined by Cleantech commentator Mike Casey of Tigercomm. Mike, how are you?
I'm good, buddy. I'm good. Hey, I just want to say, I don't know if it's coincidence or whatever, but a lot of people in our professional circles are having health problems or are losing parents. So not to name anybody, put them on the spot, but just say, if you're in our audience and you're going through something like that, we just wish you well, because it's none of those are very fun. So just want to say that. And also a friend of ours, Rebecca Holmes, this was on LinkedIn, announcing the start of her new firm, Benu. She doesn't compete with us. And you should never call Rebecca before you call our shop, because if you do, then you're a loser. But anyway, Rebecca Holmes has a new firm, and it's cool. You should check it out. And that's what I got, Paul Gerke. It's good to see you.
Thanks for bringing us up a little bit from the down note. While I definitely sympathize, and that is heartbreaking stuff, and I my heart is with anybody going through the hard things. I tried to deliver energy off the top, and you shot me down like an old duck hunt game. And now we gotta come back up from all the way down.
Where is your empathy? Is there no place on the show for empathy?
Not within the first couple minutes for me. I develop empathy as the show goes along, and I'm exposed to you, and it radiates from your screen into mine. Anyway, we're taking up too much time with nonsense. We appreciate hearing from you guys on the show, and if you are having problems, seriously, I do sympathize. Now I feel like a villain. If you got a story or 2 cents to share, you can find us at TWIC Twic at Tigercomm with 2Ms.us. Mike, as always, 5 stories locked and loaded. What's number 1 this week?
All right, Reshmi Basu and Owen McCarthy from Bloomberg. Data center troubles stoke industry's fears of coming distress. Paul Gerke, I got to tell you, it seems like 3 times a week there is a national outlet doing a story about people hating data centers. There is a lot of this being reported these days.
The bubble to end all bubbles, Mike. When it pops, keep your head down. A new survey from consulting firm AlixPartners finds data center industry is bracing for a wave of financial distress. You don't say. They talked to about 400 respondents. 68% of them said they expect distressed situations in the industry to increase over the next year or so, up from 66% in 2025. AlixPartners says it's not one bad input that's causing pessimism. It's rising energy costs and cash flow, falling compute prices, hitting all those balance sheets at the same time. Labor shortages, equipment log jams, also part of the problem. We talk about that end of it on the show. Skilled trades like electricians and plumbers, especially hard to find these days. Got to get the kids started in the trades. Mike, your thoughts?
Absolutely. Hey, this was an interesting piece. So it is not, I think it breaks some significant new ground, because it says this is not just balance sheets or community disapproval. They do talk about last week, the New York State moratorium. But money's still pouring into the sector. $334 billion in bonds and loans have been issued this year alone to fund AI infrastructure. And it's already blowing past all of 2025's $185 billion. But there are cracks. So Amazon's record $25 billion bond sale saw only a modest oversubscription and a cool reception in the secondary market. And Prime Data Centers just postponed its own bond sale. So AlixPartners says the small neocloud operators are the most exposed, and the ones that survive will be those building a viable business by selling directly to enterprise clients at scale. Paul, story number 2.
Our second story this week, Francesca Paris from the New York Times, titled, "Why States Are Making It Harder to Save Money with Solar Panels." I don't know if she says her name like that, Mike, but I think it sounds better if we say it like that.
Well, you sound internationalist regardless. Thanks. So you may not be a villain, but you were a little villainous at the start because you got on the anti-empathy train, but you recovered well. I'm going to say. All right. So, more than a third of U.S. states have changed the rules over the last decade to let utilities pay homeowners less for the solar energy they send back to the grid. So, under old school net metering, homeowners get credited at the same retail rate they pay for power, often 10 to 30 plus cents per kilowatt hour. Seems fair to me. Under the new net billing model, utilities pay that extra power back at just 2 to 10 cents. So Arkansas made that switch in 2024, and it cut it roughly $500 a year off the savings for a typical solar household, even though homeowners who already had panels were grandfathered in. Utilities argue the shift is fair since solar households still rely on the same poles and wires as everyone else, but pay for less grid upkeep. I want to add that rooftop solar advocates point out that people who produce their own power strain the grid less. There is a strong counter argument to this, the argument that's been put forth against people generating their own power. Paul, what do you think?
Yeah, fair enough. It's a saturation and a timing problem that they're getting at, Mike. The more solar you have, especially in high saturation states like California or Florida, the midday solar power brings a lot less value to the grid. You may recall California, there was a big snafu a couple of years ago when they abruptly ended net metering, and the solar industry started to crater there before it's showing some signs of life recently. Illinois phased out its version over 3 years, barely made headlines. That timing problem is also why batteries are booming right now all over the place. In California, the share for new solar installs paired with a battery has soared since net metering ended. In Hawaii, where net metering's been gone for years, almost every single solar system now comes with a battery. And we're seeing that in terms of, grid deployment too, where batteries are the real game changers for the grid. It's not the excess solar saturation that's necessary. It's what do you do once the sun goes down and you got to survive those peak hours. Batteries not cheap. Trump ended the federal battery tax credit last year, so homeowners are kind of on their own to make the math work. On the grid scale, though, fortunately, those tax credits extend to the 2030 and beyond, thanks to the IRA. Mike, story number 3.
Yeah, Raphael Huang from the Wall Street Journal. The key to solar and wind power is battery storage, and China is dominating, Paul.
Oh, it's another episode about how China's whooping our butts, huh, Mike? 5 years ago, China's grid-scale battery storage was under 4 gigawatts. You want to guess what it is today? You're looking at the same piece of paper I am, so you know the number.
I do not want to guess.
155 gigawatts, man.
Yeah.
Beijing is targeting 300 by 2030. They'll get there in 2029 and celebrate the achievement. That build out, that's what lets China go so hard in solar and wind. It now accounts for almost a quarter of their power mix, those two renewable technologies. And storage banks all that extra sun and wind for when the grid really needs it. Chinese companies, they're not just building at home. The world's top 10 storage battery cell makers, they're all Chinese. Together, they hold about 90% of the global market. Even Tesla's Megapack business runs through that supply chain. Its Shanghai plant sources cells from CATL for markets outside the U.S. Mike, your thoughts?
So we're a distant second. 57 gigawatts of solar storage right now, though Wood Mackenzie thinks it could hit 200 gigawatts within 5 years. China also dominates the processing of lithium, cobalt, and graphite that go into these batteries. Beijing's been tightening export limits on top of that since 2023. Trump's tariff and his tax bill are starting to change that math. The storage projects with Chinese components no longer qualify for tax credits. And Wood Mackenzie's Zhang Jue says that's the only thing that's slowing China's march to even more market share in the U.S.
I got to say, though, Mike. Yeah, go ahead. You first.
Yeah. Here's the problem, though, with the current approach. Wishing away the clean energy transition does not stop it globally from happening. And we should be clear that U.S. policymakers are choosing to hand the energy of technologies of tomorrow away right now. And
yeah, they're already handed away.
It's catastrophically stupid.
There's a little bit of I want my cake and I want to eat it too in all of this. And when you don't control the feedstock for any of these supply chains, let alone having to use Chinese products further up the chain, you've already handed them the keys, right? So without the lithium, without the cobalt, without the graphite, without the refineries, without the smelting, without the glass production, without all the things we just don't do in this country anymore, ultimately all roads will lead to Rome. And in this instance, Rome is China. Look up how many massive cities are in China sometime when you're bored. It's going to blow your mind. Story 4.
Emperor Gerke, you need to go to story 4 now.
I already said story 4. Story 4, Jeff St. John at Canary. We got multiple St. Johns on the program. That's cool. State legislatures getting better at clean energy permitting policy. Tell me about it, Mike.
A new tally from the Siting Solutions Project looked at more than 200 state bills across 40 plus states this year, and the picture is a lot better than 2025's wave of restrictive siting laws. So out of 86 bills that would have made it harder to permit solar, wind, and battery projects, only one became law, a scaled-back Utah measure limiting tax credits for solar on certain farmland. Last year, 10 restrictive bills passed across 6 states. So AI-driven demand growth plus affordability crunch means legislators, even in red states, are looking for the fastest, cheapest way to add power to the grid, and that's solar, wind, and batteries. Strong echoes of the Cleantech Bulls case. Folks like Jigger Shaw, Kevin Smith, Dan Sugar, and Steve Vavrick are all saying this. Seems like reality is catching up here. Broad coalitions of developers, industry groups, and even agricultural and labor interests have been showing up to block restrictive bills. Paul?
All right, Siting Solutions notes the strongest winds in Illinois, Oregon, Virginia, and Washington, but they are still mostly counted as, quote, minor improvements to the status quo rather than big structural changes. For example, Virginia's law doesn't force localities to approve solar projects, but it does ban community-wide bans and requires local governments to explain reasoning to state legislatures. Even red states are in on the fun. Oklahoma set new decommissioning standards for old solar and battery sites, though its governor had to pocket veto a separate bill that would have stripped solar's property tax benefits. It's still a lot easier to block a clean energy project than to pass a law that helps one get built, Mike, and federal permitting freezes are still hanging over close to 100 gigawatts of projects no matter what the states decide to do. Time for story number 5. Let's bring in our guest.
Sir. Returning a guest, Alexa St. John from the Associated Press. Need backup power? Automakers want you to look no further than the vehicles in your driveway. Alexa, first, welcome back. It's been a couple of years. I'm really glad to have you back on the show. We want people to read this story, but for those who have not, what is the big takeaway?
Well, thanks for having me again. It's amazing that it's been 2 years already. But the big takeaway really is to think about the vehicle that you have in your driveway, your garage, or the vehicle you're thinking about purchasing as sort of an asset in power outages and eventually as an asset to support the electrical grid.
Okay, we've talked about these sort of programs before, Baltimore Gas and Electric having the first EV to grid pilot. What exactly is the difference now? What has evolved over the last little bit that's enabled automakers to really tap into those big, powerful batteries? They're way bigger and stronger than Tesla Powerwalls, for example.
Yeah, I think what's been so interesting over the past couple of years is as we're at this kind of interesting point with EV policy in the US in particular, automakers are sitting on this billions of dollars of investment in electrification, the energy space, and they're trying to figure out how to channel that to something while we're at this sort of standstill. So it makes sense for them to look towards the home energy management business as a place to play. And of course, for them, that can suggest to consumers just how much of an asset owning an EV or a plug-in hybrid could be. So I think it's sort of multifold now, this approach that automakers are taking, and we're still in early days, right? I mean, the automakers I spoke with for the story said that as well. But it's making progress, and I think more and more consumers, not many, but more and more starting to kind of think about, okay, what's the potential of the vehicle?
Alexa, you got to tell me if this is too much of a stretch, but as I've read stories like yours and others that talk about what EVs can unlock in terms of grid flexibility, it's almost like this is a new form of net metering. Do you think that that's a fair comparison? And where does it stop being a legit parallel?
Yeah, I mean, I probably have to think about that some more, but I think, just bigger picture, given how early days we are, there's still a lot to be sorted out, right? For now, I think the biggest, potential is in vehicle to home. So we're not quite at the full extent of what vehicle to grid will look like. So there are probably a lot of questions still to be answered there. But if you look at sort of just basic support for your home, something like like vehicle to home technology, whether it's in this Ford vehicle, some of the other vehicles I mentioned in the story, during power outage situations, which we're seeing more and more frequently. Unfortunately, we had in Detroit terrible outages just over the 4th of July weekend. I mean, that on its own just sounds like a pretty big selling point, but I think it's still pretty early to say just how far this goes.
Paul, you're a fellow Detroiter. Did you want to close with the last question?
Yeah, I'll take that one, Mike. My question about all of this is how the consumer buys in. Because is it like a cable situation? I know the bidirectionality has been a bit of a tech roadblock, but it sounds like by your story, that's largely been solved and there are more solutions available for the consumer. How easy is it for people who don't want to think about power, much less backup power, to actually utilize the tool in their garage?
Yeah, well, I think that's going to remain to be a big issue for the automakers, right? I mean, to them, they want to put out these announcements. This is easy. Just plug in your car. I mean, that's not really the case entirely. You do have to think about the meter connection, a cable, making sure it does connect appropriately to your vehicle in a way that's safe, in a way that's not, sending power back to the grid when we don't want it to be. Right. So there's a lot to be said. And think of how much education has had to have been done with plug-in hybrids, EVs. We're still kind of in that educational phase, let alone we'll think about that big car in your driveway as a big battery. I think there's a lot that'll still be challenging for the automakers to communicate, especially if they want customers to think of them, again, as energy businesses and not just those folks that sell you a vehicle. So I think it will be tough. And then I think, obviously still working with the utilities, making sure everything is compatible. There's a long way to go there as well.
It's absolutely fascinating. Boy, I've got 4 more questions to ask, but we're about out of time. Paul, we need to go to our Cleantecher of the Week.
All right. This week's Cleantecher of the Week is Cora Stryker, co-founder of BrightSaver, a nonprofit just started selling zero-markup plug-in balcony solar kits. You may have heard about those. They're all over the news lately. Started about $300. Shipping to 47 states kicks off in August. Cora said that nonprofits are often willing to stomach some financial losses in the short term because the mission is to get solar into the hands of more people so they can lower energy bills and carbon pollution long term. Congratulations to Cora Stryker, our Cleantecher of the Week.
I love balcony solar. I think it's so totally cool. But we want to thank our wonderful producer, Brian Mendez, as well as Alex Peterson and Claire Quirin for helping gather these stories.
I need balcony solar that can power my air conditioner. Then we'll talk, Mike. Thanks for joining us on this episode of This Week in Cleantech.
You're going all villainous again.
Yeah, I like to bring it around full circle. I'm the bad guy again. Saying thank you to everybody. Thanks to Alexa St. John for coming back and putting up with us for another episode. If you enjoyed it, subscribe, leave a little feedback, share a story suggestion, do what you like. You can also read every article we talk about each week. There are links in the episode description as well as in the post where this lives on factorthis.com. Have a good one, everybody. Be good.
Thank you, Alexa St. John. Take care.